the radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Monday night. I hope you're having a great beginning to your week. Look forward to a great week ahead of us. All right. So I was going to do a show on something positive. I was going to talk about human progress, where it comes from, its origins, and so on. And then I came across this, and but I was not completely prepared to talk about it, so I was still hesitant. And then I came across an article by John Cochrane, one of my favorite economists, about this issue of a contested election. I figured, this is a topic that should get views. One of the problems with the positive topics, the interesting topics, the topics that actually help us grow as human beings, is that a lot fewer people are interested, a lot fewer people watch them. We're going to change that. I'm going to figure out a way on how to change that. But the fact is that the idea of human progress, the idea of what leads to human progress, what's involved in human progress, is going to be a major theme on the Yaron Brook Show in the year and years to come. I'm going to be interviewing Yaron Brook soon on his new book, Open, about this topic. I'm going to be doing a series of shows about it. I think it's going to be really interesting. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I have to do some more thinking about exactly what I want to say and how I want to present it and stuff. But I think human progress, a positive aspect of it, what to do about it, how to look at it, and ultimately, here's the kicker, how to invest in it. So I also want to figure out a way in which we can make money off of human progress, right? So we're working on it. I'm working on it, and I expect interesting things to come. Aubrey de Grey is the guy working on life extension. There are a number of people working on life extension that are interested, but I'm more interested in what it is than in documenting what it. I want to understand what causes it, what brings it about, and from an investment perspective, I want to look at the things that blow it up. Right? I mean, why does Amazon become Amazon? Why does Apple become Apple post 2009 or whatever? Why does not 2009, 2002, or 2001, whenever the iPod was introduced? Why does Google become Google? So why did these or any one of these companies? What does it take to change the world? What does it take to change the world? From a business perspective, what does it take to get to the point where you have lots of businesses who are changing the world? What does it take to leverage any great innovation, right? So how do you create mass growth? So we've talked already to Matt Ridley, and that's great. The two interviews with Matt Ridley, some of my favorites. So hopefully you've listened to them, and Matt Ridley is an important thinker in this realm. Yaron Brook is, and there are many others who are working in this area, and we're gonna do some work here on the Yaron Brook Show on this topic. Anyway, I think it's gonna be fun. Still gonna be fun. Still in love with diversity. I don't know what that means, but yeah, I'm all for openness. All right. We're going to talk about contested election. We're going to go through John Cochrane's article, which I think is really interesting. But before that, a couple of things, criticisms I read online from my previous show, from the show I did on Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the Supreme Court issue and all of that. And so a couple of them, let me just look here. We have a few of them. So I just want to clarify some issues. So one was, people said, oh, no, it wasn't it wasn't the Republicans who did away with the filibuster for the Supreme Court. It was Harry Reid under Obama who changed the rule, but not accurate, right? So Harry Reid indeed did eliminate the filibuster for executive positions, but not explicitly for Supreme Court. So the nominees that Obama appointed to the Supreme Court all had to get 60 votes. And indeed, historically, most judges appointed to Supreme Court got over 60 votes, because there was even Clarence Thomas, where there was a big, attempt to derail, and he was a controversial candidate anyway because of his views on the Constitution and so on. Even he got over 60 votes. I don't remember the exact number he got. So Harry Reid changed the filibuster rule not to apply to executive appointments, with the idea of, all the people that the president appoints to in the White House to different positions, regulatory agencies, and so on that require congressional approval. They did away with the filibuster for those. And then Senator McConnell, Republicans, did away with the filibuster for Supreme Court nominations, and both of Trump's nominees for the Supreme Court did not get 60 votes. So it was the Republicans. It was under Trump, and Trump has throughout the last few years been calling the Republicans wimps for not getting rid of the filibuster completely. So he will have little to complain. Let's say he wins the election and the Democrats win the Senate. He will have little complain when the Democrats do away with the filibuster. He's been arguing for getting rid of it. Now, I'm going to argue on the show that I would like to see a much stronger filibuster instituted in a way that they cannot get rid of it at whim. So I would like to see a filibuster that, to get rid of, you would need a filibuster. You don't need 60 votes. Because I think not having the filibuster is truly, truly scary and bad for the American system of government. The other one I saw, there was a long comment about how I said that abortion was the most important issue of our time. And I did not say that. I said it was an important issue of our time. And if I said it was the most important issue of our time, then I'm mistaken. The most important issue of our time, the most important issue is free speech. And I've said that a million times, a gazillion times. I've done so many shows. Indeed, the first show ever done in the Yaron Brook show was about free speech when Charlie Hebdo was attacked, the day of the attack of Charlie Hebdo. So I've been doing free speech forever. And free speech is the most important issue. The thing about the court is that I don't see, and the guy who wrote about this said, the issue of hate speech, and Democrats want to outlaw hate speech. Yeah, certain Democrats want to outlaw hate speech, but there's no, even minority in the Supreme Court that I think would vote for restrictions on speech based on hate speech. I don't think a single judge would support that. And if you could find a single judge, maybe it's one or two judges, I don't think that issue of free speech at the court level, particularly the issue of hate speech, is threatened right now. I think it's threatened in more nuanced ways, in threatening newspapers, not really doing anything, but threatening them, and harassing newspapers, and going after Jeff Bezos because he's the owner of the Washington Post, not going after the Washington Post, which the Supreme Court would not tolerate, but going after Jeff Bezos because he owns the Washington Post. And then it's using intimidation and violence, and the government not protecting you against that in order to prevent people from speaking, whether it's on campuses and other places. I think those are the real threats to free speech in America. I don't think it's legislation that bans hate speech. Not yet. I think we're far from that, and I think the Supreme Court would not uphold such legislation. At least, I don't think I'm being naive, but that is my assessment. So I do think abortion is a huge issue, not only because I'm pro-abortion, but because I think the anti-abortion, the energy behind anti-abortion is all about religion. and to bring religion into our world, by the Supreme Court in a way that would be disastrous, and that would be disastrous. There's no other motivation to be anti-abortion other, in my view, than religion or some acceptance of religion, some intrinsic value acceptance. All right. Jason says, after 10,000 years of laissez-faire capitalism, I assume computers and machines will produce all values human work will now be required. I don't think that's true. I also think it's 10,000 years. I mean, who knows what will happen in 10,000 years? But think about the fact that in 10,000 years, human beings won't be exactly human beings. We will have, managed evolution. We will have technology embedded in our own genes. We will, the separation of computers, robots from human beings seems to me in 10,000 years unlikely, and work will still have to be done. It'll just be more breakthrough work, more interesting work, more work at the edges. So I'm not a transhumanism because I don't know what that is, in a sense that I don't think it's an ideology. I just think that's how technology is going to evolve. I think that makes sense. It doesn't make sense to have computers over there, human beings over here, when we'll reach a scientific point where you can integrate the two. And I think that's where we're heading. So I don't think work just disappears. I think basic needs, what we perceive today as basic needs, are dealt with very easily and cheaply and so on. But there's always other stuff that needs to be done, more stuff to be explored, more places to go, more art to be created, more experiences to be had. There's always going to be human work that is going to be necessary. Manual labor, probably not. But work of the mind and work. But remember, even then, one of the advantages of integrating technology into in a sense the human genome is that you can then eliminate the issue of the horsepower, the issue of the intelligence you're born with, because you can first of all you can genetically modify people not to have low intelligence, but also you'll be able to have machines that can enhance the intelligence. If technology gets to the point where we know you're going to give birth on Wednesday and you decide to have an abortion on Tuesday, is that murder? Should it be legal? Look, these are hypotheticals that mean nothing. I mean, do women still carry their fetuses to birth? Does the fetus taken out at some point and nourished in some safer place than in the womb? And there are a lot of issues that will be resolved when the technology gets to that. But as long as you're not an individual, you have no individual rights. It's not the fact that you're a potential human being that gives you a right. It is the fact that you are a human being that gives you a right. And a fetus, and certainly a clump of cells at 3 months, while if left alone, you might develop into a human being, and you might not. Lots of natural abortions happen before birth, but you're still a potential. You're not a realization. And Leonard Peikoff makes a big deal when talking about abortion, justifiably so, on the differentiation between potential and reality. Potentials don't have rights. Only realities have rights. And plus, nobody's going to do an abortion the day before. No doctor would perform one. So a lot of this stuff is not relevant. It's kind of edge cases purposefully constructed that really teaches us nothing about the essential issue. I mean, if all we were arguing about was abortion in the third trimester, then I wouldn't be that worried. But any argument about abortion in the third trimester is just an excuse to ban abortion in the first trimester. And that is so absurd and ridiculous that I think it would be a major step backwards if it happened. Okay, let's get into this lovely topic. I cannot think of anything more depressing than this idea, but both John Cochrane, as you know, writes the Grumpy Economist blog, and he's one of my favorite economists and one of my favorite writers. He writes interesting pieces. And what is her name? Where is she? Peggy Noonan. Peggy Noonan wrote about this over the weekend in the Wall Street Journal. So we've had two significant writers. Peggy Noonan, I assume she thinks of herself as a Republican. John Cochran is some kind of free marketer. I don't know if he considers himself a Republican or libertarian, exactly what. But I don't think he's very political in that sense. But both of them are warning against a real issue. So here's the issue. Both Donald Trump and Joe Biden have suggested that they will not concede the election immediately if it's even remotely close. Nobody's clear exactly under what conditions, what remotely close means, what close means. But both have suggested that there is a real potential of fraud. Biden has accused Trump of committing that fraud, and Republicans will have committed that fraud. And Trump, of course, has suggested that Democrats are going to commit significant fraud. And Trump has explicitly named mail-in voting as the source of that fraud, which is quite convenient because mail-in voting is going to be a source of uncertainty because it's going to take a while to actually, figure out what all the mail-in voting suggests, because it's not clear when it has to be mailed in and when it has to be counted and when it actually has to get to the place. And there are a variety of different legal challenges at the different states, and there's legislation, but then the courts say the legislation is vague. So there's a lot of contention around the issue of mail-in voting. And while for the most part Trump's accusations of mail-in voting is inherently or largely susceptible to fraud seem somewhat arbitrary and not based on reality, it doesn't matter. It's people think that, people believe that, and of course that's what matters. It's not the reality, it's what people believe the reality to be that is going to dictate behavior on election night. So there's very much the fear that one of the two candidates is shown to be leading on election night. Maybe even one or two of the networks call it in their favor, but that the other candidate won't concede because there's still many votes to be counted, supposedly. At that point, you could imagine teams of lawyers being sent out, not just to one state like we saw in 2000 with Florida and the hanging chads, but to every state, or at least every close state. You can imagine 10, 15 states being close enough to justify having lawyers. And my guess is that both Democrats and Republicans already have the lawyers identified, have the teams ready to go, and will be using that option if the election is at all close. So if it's close, and here we're talking about not close just in terms of who seems to be winning the most electoral college votes, but close in terms of close in particular states. So, for example, you could have Trump or Biden winning 5 different states that gives them a huge electoral college majority. But each one of those states being very close in their vote, and therefore legal challenges being filed. So you can very much see Trump or Biden declaring themselves victorious on election night or just after election night. And then, but the loser not, or the seeming loser not conceding, then legal challenges all around, ultimately a different vote count appearing, the whole thing being rushed to the Supreme Court to make a decision so that it doesn't drag out. I mean, it dragged out for a long time in Florida, and that was, again, one state. Imagine now on a whole slew of states this happening. And now this is being dragged out, and the Supreme Court is intervening. And the Supreme Court, let's say, votes one way or the other. Now, let's imagine that Trump is the one who declares victory, and Biden refused to acknowledge it, refused to concede, Democrats file lawsuits in 10 different states or 15 different states. And that at the end of the day, so what happens on the night that Trump declares victory and Biden refuses to concede? I mean, there are demonstrations all over the country. Many of the demonstrations turning into riots. Many of those riots becoming super violent. You could see that in most major cities. The Democrats are putting together, as we speak, the infrastructure to make that happen. Certainly voices within the Democratic Party are encouraging that, encouraging people to plan to demonstrate the outcome of the election if it's close and if there's a sense, a feeling that Donald Trump is trying to steal the election. And by the way, Trump is feeding this because he keeps saying he's not sure he'd concede if he's losing. And, so there's this, and Biden now saying the same. So there's this feeding of this atmosphere. You could imagine demonstrations out in the streets, followed by riots, or maybe it's the same thing. By the way, if you have questions, you can use the Super Chat feature. I see a lot of people wondering who I would vote for. What you can ask Super Chat. What do I think other people should vote for? Do I think people can disagree about who to vote for? Just put a question together. And if you put $20 into that question, you get a faster answer. So we get a situation where it goes to the Supreme Court like it did in 2000. And like 2000, let's say the court rules, maybe there's only 8 justices, it's a 5-3 decision, maybe it's a 6-3 decision, maybe it's a 5-4 decision, maybe it's a 4-4. Imagine it's 4-4. Because Roberts goes with the left. Who knows? And in the 2000 election, many Democrats for years argued that Bush was an illegitimate president because the Supreme Court basically gave him the presidency, even though when they went back and counted all the votes by any standard he won, they viewed that as illegitimate. So imagine now if a Supreme Court votes with Donald Trump, a far more divisive president than Judge Bush was. Now what happens? Well, you get demonstrations, riots, and then you get Trump sending in the military, declaring, using the Insurrection Act, sending in the military. He views it as a law and order move. The left views it as as trying to steal the election. The left views it as martial law. If the military is not deployed, you could see right-wing militias going out into the streets and trying to establish order. You can see real bloodshed in the streets. But even with the military deployed, what happens if the governors of the particular states don't cooperate? What happens if the governors of the particular states, in a sense, they don't literally withdraw from the union, but they basically stop cooperating with the federal government on a variety of different issues? And that becomes a huge issue. We're heading towards real, not just constitutional challenges, but potentially really existential challenges for this country and this system of government. Now, Cochrane points out that one of the things that makes our system of government work, one of the things that I, for example, admire George Washington so much for, is that the loser concedes and the winner takes over and everybody accepts it. It's what gives our system of government legitimacy. There is a transition of power. The world does not end if the opposition party comes to power. Although on the right and on the left today, there's this perspective, there's this perception of this is the end of worlds. If the Democrats win This is Flight 93 election. Have you heard about the Flight 93 election? This was 2016. Yeah, before the election in 2016 between Clinton and Trump. Basically, Anton. I forget his name now. Something Anton wrote this famous editorial. He wrote it anonymously originally. Now we know who wrote it. Basically, this conservative, nationalist conservative commentator. He wrote this op-ed saying, "Look, if the Democrats win, the world is over. America's finished. So what we need to do is elect Donald Trump, not because we like Donald Trump, but because it's the only chance we have." He said it was like rushing the cockpit of Flight 93 on September 11th. You know you're probably going to die anyway, but you know that if you don't try, you're certainly going to die. So he said, we know electing Donald Trump will probably kill us anyway, but we know that electing Clinton, we're dead for sure. That was in 2016. Today, Republicans are even more convinced than ever that electing Biden would end the republic as we know it, would end America as we know it. And Democrats are convinced more than anything that re-electing Trump is the end of our world. Gone are the days where, it's bad if the Democrats win, but okay, we'll survive, we'll regroup, we'll try again, and we'll go after it. And part of the reason why it's so devastating if the Democrats win this time, particularly if they take the Senate, is they will do away with the filibuster, because that's what's been happening. And it's 51 votes, and they could pass anything. Add states, Medicare for all, and on and on and on you can go. Pack the court and everything else. So it seems like it's the end of times. And of course, the Democrats view it the same way with Republicans, although the Democrats have some fallback because they will probably continue to control the House of Representatives after this election. But think about what it would mean if after this election, whoever gets in, let's say it's Trump for now, imagine what it means if that is viewed as completely illegitimate, not just by crazy Antifa, not just by the far left, but by the mainstream left, by, 51% of the country. Because remember, Trump is almost certain to lose the popular vote. That means a majority of Americans, a majority of Americans are likely to think he's an illegitimate president. Governors would think it's illegitimate. What would that mean to the functioning of the country? To the attitude, to the atmosphere, to taking us a step closer to what many people predict is the inevitable outcome of a civil war. But same thing can happen on the flip side. Let's say Biden looks like he is winning. And let's say at the end of the first night, at the election night, Biden declares victory. And Trump does not concede and refuses to concede and sends lawyers to all these states and challenges the vote and takes it to the Supreme Court. Does the Supreme Court overturn what appears to be the results? The Supreme Court side with Biden, with Trump? How does that play out? Does the right go out into the street to demonstrate? John Cochran thinks probably not, partially because they don't live in the cities. They're more dispersed, less likely to organize, partially because he thinks they have a little bit more respect for the Constitution and a little bit more respect for the process. But he's not very convincing, and I'm not very convinced. They're also probably better armed. Right? I mean, one of the challenges of having the entire population armed and with guns is what happens if they go into the street with guns? What happens if they start using those guns? And in this kind of scenario, would Trump send in the military, declare the Insurrection Act and use the military to bring about peace if it's the right demonstrating? And if he doesn't, and what happens if the Democratic governors bring out the National Guard? I mean, there's so many things that could go wrong here. There's so many pitfalls. There's so many things can result in real chaos, real bloodshed, real disasters. And what does the military do? Does the military accept whatever they're asked to do by the White House? Do they turn him down? Does the military ultimately have to intervene in order to assert who is the legitimate president who actually won the election? I mean, can you think of a worse outcome than that? I mean, it does sound like an election in a banana republic, absolutely. But our polarization, the insanity of the last, I don't know how many years, but certainly since Obama was elected, the ongoing, constant drumbeat that relates to the evil of the other side, the complete and utter evil of the other side. And that there's no way to deal, even though, by the way, which is interesting, I think, on many issues, there's not a big difference between Republicans and Democrats. I mean, you can see that in the $3.9 trillion stimulus packages. I mean, they all agreed on that. Nobody, there was no big disagreement on that. Yeah, the Democrats want more, Republicans want a little less, but the disagreements are minor. There's no disagreement really even over healthcare. I mean, we've socialized over 50% of the U.S. healthcare market. It's called Medicare and Medicaid. Nobody disagrees about that. I mean, they quibble about the rest of the healthcare system and how much of it we want to socialize. But it's not, the disagreement between left and right today in America is not over principle. Particularly if you exclude the people on the far left and the far right. If you include the majority of Democrats and the majority of Republicans agree on most things. Most things. It's the rhetoric, it's the attitude, it's the fear, it's the panic. That are at the core of this. So, this is not a big debate about principles, because neither party represents any principles. Neither party represents any principles. Ayn Rand wrote about this in the 70s, when both parties were much better, much more principled, if you will, than they are today. I mean, some people on the left think that we're all racists. But is that what's embodied in the Biden campaign? Is that what's embodied in the Democratic Party? Do we take the far left and just brush all Democrats with the far left brush? No. Come on. You know Democrats. I know people who are Democratic. Yeah, they think there's a lot of racism in America, but they don't buy into this bullshit any more than you can paint everybody on the right with a brush of white supremacists or nationalists, or even the national conservatives, who are not racist but are borderline. But you don't paint the entire everybody with that. I mean, even Harris, she is a power-lusting, unprincipled pragmatist. She doesn't believe, one of the things the far left hates about her is that she was a tough district attorney. You can tell by how the far left treats Biden and Harris. To know that they can be members of that group. Because they treat them as complete outsiders, as enemies, as threats. They'll vote for them, but... And look, she has to play to the left because that's where she's going to get her votes. Just like Trump has to play to the right and play to religion and play to all of this stuff because that's where his votes come from. So you have to get the base. I mean, I know the left hates me. You know what? So does the right. I mean, all you have to be is on this chat on YouTube to discover that many people hate me. More people hate me than subscribe to my channel. So, I know people hate me. But my point is that I could understand this polarization if the polarization was on principles. But the polarization is not about principles. Can we monetize that hate, Yaron? Stephanie, you're onto something. I like it. All right, that's a project. We're going to think about how to monetize hate. Maybe we could sell t-shirts. Hate Yaron t-shirts. Yeah, Simon likes me on a 50-50 basis. I'm not sure what that means. And he erased it. All right, don't forget to use Super Chat to ask questions. Super Chat. And if you like the show, if you like what we do in the show, then don't forget to support us. Support the show at yaronbrookshow.com/support on Patreon, on Subscribestar, on any of those platforms. But of course, let's get those numbers on Super Chat up. Or the last few times we've set very, very, very aggressive benchmarks. So we're far from where we were yesterday and the day before, when the Super Chat was very lucrative. All right. We need Simon from Iceland to step in and motivate everybody to do something significant today. But I think it's too late. My guess is it's too late in Iceland for anything like this, for anything like that to happen. I mean, AOC is the true face of a party. Maybe she will become. And let's hope that Donald Trump is not the true face of the Republican Party. Or who's these nationalist conservatives. Let's hope that Steve Bannon is not the face of the future of the Republican Party. I mean, that is what we're trying to fight against. That Steve Bannon and AOC become the faces of their respective parties. Simone writes, but the right-leaning people love Israel. So, I mean, is Israel? I mean, it's shocking, but is Israel the standard by which we should determine all our decisions and vote in the United States of America? And I'm an American. I vote based on what's good for America. Yeah, I skipped the donkey part. You could say the same thing, by the way, about Bannon. Oh, Bannon's going to jail, actually, so maybe Bannon is not the future of the Republican Party. Maybe he's going to jail. So think about the potential chaos. Add the dimension of Ruth Bader Ginsburg into this. Add the dimension of the fact that what happens if the Republicans cram really quickly a vote through before actual election day so that they have a seemingly 6-3 majority. Now you could argue that a lot of people in the country would view the Supreme Court as illegitimate. So when the Supreme Court votes on the legitimacy of the election, will the American people recognize what the court has said? In the past, in spite of the court being partisan, the court is always viewed as, at the end of the day, being about the rule of law. And at the end of the day, being that the court is legitimate. It's not politics, but there's some legitimacy to its rulings. If that has disappeared, if that is disappearing, if that will disappear, then what happens? Or imagine that he doesn't get it through, but Republicans intend to pass it in the lame duck Congress. Imagine they lose the Senate, but they still have 2 months, 3 months, almost 3 months, November, December, January, to pass the nominee and for Trump to sign him off, even though both might be lame duck by then. What will the country do then? What will be the response? And imagine if the demonstrations, riots, the military's put out, but then the Democrats take control of the Senate, and then the Democrats add 2 more judges to the Supreme Court. And Republicans freak out, and the right freaks out, and the right goes out in the streets, and the right goes out in the streets with guns. My point is this. Someone says, America is finished, and it's all thanks to you all. I wish I had that kind of power. I mean, it's funny because I know that if Trump loses this election, all these people on my chat are going to blame me, as if, A, people do what I tell them to do, because I know you all drones who just do exactly what I tell you to do and don't think for yourself. B, as if you could sway the vote anyway, as if there are enough of you to sway the vote. Right? If all of you, if every single person who subscribes to my channel voted for Biden instead of Bush, it would make exactly zero difference to the outcome of the election. I've tried to unite the liberty movement, and it's hopeless, because I've tried to unite the liberty movement over years. I've worked with libertarians of all kinds. And at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do with anarchists, with libertarians that don't respect philosophy, and libertarians that disagree. Unite the libertarian movement around what? Around whom? Trump? Biden? Jorgensen? Who are we going to unite the liberty movement around? Oh, and that's right. And a bunch of my supporters don't even live in the United States. They can't even vote. But you know what? If Trump loses, it's all going to be my fault. People are rich. Irony is rich. All right. So you can see why this is scary. And it's not scary in the sense that I think a majority of Americans want the country to burn. It's scary that the way Trump has behaved, and I think Obama before him led to this, has put us in a position where there is real hatred in the streets of America, where both the far left and the far right have been radicalized and emboldened. Both the far left and the far right view this as an existential threat, and are willing to commit violence in order to stop it. So I think we're living in a period where post-election, I'm worried. I'm worried. I think I'm glad I'm going to be in Puerto Rico on election night, because Puerto Rico just doesn't have as much at stake, and therefore there won't be as much angst about the results of the election. Although, if Puerto Rico, in November, there's a ballot in Puerto Rico elections about becoming a state, and if the Puerto Ricans vote that they want to become a state, and the Democrats win the Senate and the presidency, then there's a good chance Puerto Rico could become a state. And that's a whole other issue. So, things have been bad in this country for a long time. Our liberties have been threatened in Puerto Rico, in the United States for a long time. But things might be taking a big step towards chaos and towards the abyss during this election night in November. Somebody says they will be rioting in Puerto Rico too. No, I doubt it. I doubt it very much. All right. Let's see. Barry says, my dad is an old school Democrat, loves FDR, and has similar critiques and attitudes towards Trump as you do. Do you think there is a generational difference in how people view Trump existentially? Yeah, I think probably that's true. I guess I'm not sure what you mean exactly, but I do think it's true that young people have less memory, less history, less knowledge, less experience. Everything seems to be much more dramatic for them. But I also think among young people, I think the latest polling shows 68% of young people are going to vote for Biden. But what percentage of those people are Antifa? What percentage of those people are rioters? What percentage of those people, not demonstrated with Black Lives Matter, but really understand what Black Lives Matter is and support their nihilistic cause? Very few. Very few. So even among young people, I don't think the nuttiness is the dominant view. The far left is the dominant view. Any more than I think among young people, the far right is a dominant view. Among the right-wing young people. So it's I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to be this pessimistic because it's not in my nature. But John Cochrane, who is not typically this pessimistic and is rational, and I mean, if he has gotten to the point where he's worried about this, then I guess I should be worried. Now, on top of that, the Democrats, there is a working paper. You can find it on paxmisims.files.wordpress.com. It's a working paper about what the Democrats should do on election night. And basically the working paper says if it's at all close, not to concede. It's basically telling people, organize to demonstrate, be ready for street action, close off streets, demonstrate in Washington, D.C., make this into a big issue, don't stop. So the two political parties, certainly the Democrats, but I believe the Republicans are too, are getting ready for chaos on election nights. They're getting ready for massive disruptions. And I think it's going to be significantly scary. Significantly scary. And, I mean, yeah, Christopher mentions the deep state. I mean, imagine if Roberts votes with the left on one of these issues. I mean, the right is going to freak out and claim that he is part of the deep state, and he's always part of the deep state. I mean, and the whole language of the deep state is dangerous and destructive. I've talked about that in the past. So, results delayed in 2000, not for months, for weeks. The difference is there were no demonstrations, no riots in 2000. There wasn't a visceral hatred of Trump, and there wasn't a hatred of Gore like the right hates Biden right now, or the right hates the left more generally right now. What is at the core of the hates between left and right? I mean, that's a really important question. It's a really important question. And I've said this before. I think the source of the hate is at the end of the day the left's behavior, the far left's detachment from American principles, from American values, from civilized values. And the right's response at an emotional level to that. But then, once that happened, and I think it started happening really under Obama, that this hatred of the left developed and hatred of Obama developed, even though he won re-election. So the right wasn't that motivated or that, big, if you will. But a sense that the left was taking over, a sense that the left was just imposing its cultural views on the rest of the country. And I think a lot of the difference between the left and the right boils down to things like religion, boils down to gay marriage, boils down to transsexual issues, boils down to immigration. It boils down to the social issues more than it does to economic issues. Because again, I don't think there's that much difference between the left and the right when it comes to economics. But I think many people on the right felt like this was being crammed down their throat. I mean, Obamacare was a big part of that. That's an economic /issue. But that's the rise of the Tea Party, which basically said these people are destroying the Constitution. Now, the Tea Party didn't know where to go, didn't know where to take that, didn't know what to do with it, didn't know the principles on which to coalesce around. And it's so what that has evolved to, or devolved into, is not so much an argument about principles, because neither party can articulate a principle. It's devolved into my feelings versus your feelings. It's devolved into my tribe versus your tribe. The Tea Party gave up on the Constitution. The Tea Party gave up on free markets. The Tea Party gave up on free trade. The Tea Party was a lot more open to immigration than Republicans are today. The Tea Party's gone. And what the Tea Party evolved into is we're anti-them. And we're for imposing what we think America is on everybody. And I think we devolved into two tribes. The left keeps pushing these issues, and the right keeps responding with one upsmanship, not with principles, not with argument, but with one upsmanship. And I talked about this in the context of racism. You know, the left goes, we're all determined by our race, and the right goes, oh, okay. And the one thing that's dying is individualism. What dies with individualism is individual rights. And so rights die with individualism. What dies with rights? America. America is the land of individual rights. America is the land of individualism more than anything else. And if you listen to Tucker Carlson rejects individualism. And all of them on the new right reject individual rights because they view individualism as a feature of the left. Individualism to them is subjectivism. Individualism for them is the whim worship of kind of the left. Individualism, and I've seen article after article after article coming out of the right saying the problem is we have too much individualism in America. The problem is there's not enough common good in America. There's not enough working for the common good in America. There's too much focus on the individual and his whims and his wishes and his desires. And again, there's no difference between the left and the right here in principle. Both advocate for altruism, both advocate for collectivism. But this is what happens. Ayn Rand, years and years and years ago, obviously 60s and 70s, talked about what happens in a mixed economy. And I think you can't eliminate the economic issues here, right? In a mixed economy, what happens is more and more the distribution of wealth is associated with distribution of political power. In a mixed economy, if you can get the government to give you favors at my expense, or you can do that in a mixed economy, I'm going to fight the government and I'm going to fight you. A mixed economy encourages pressure groups. It encourages gangs. It encourages tribes. It encourages us versus them. And think about the mixed economy broader than just economics. Think about the negation once you abandon individual rights. Well, on what basis does government function? On the basis of democracy, on the basis of majority rule. Well, what happens to minorities? And the minority could be the Republican tribe, feels like they're the minority when Democrats control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And then they're sure that what's going to happen is the Democrats are going to pass all kinds of things that are going to screw them, their tribe, the Republican tribe. And the Democrats feel the same way. If the Republican tribe controls politics, if they have the majority somehow, they're going to screw the minority, which is Democrats. So it becomes zero-sum on all dimensions. Whereas if you think about the way the American system of government was constructed, it was constructed in order to protect minorities, primarily individuals. But even in politics to protect minorities. The filibuster is to make sure that a simple majority can't get anything passed. That's an effort to protect the minority. So the minority doesn't feel like if they lose an election, the world is lost. If they lose it more than 60 senators, then the world might be lost. But as long as they can maintain 40-something senators, then they can still control the agenda. They can still stop the really, really bad stuff from happening. Valdrin, since you can't super chat from Albania, you can make a contribution on PayPal. You can PayPal, and then just write the question here, and I'll take it, assuming that you've done the super chat, right? So you just go to paypal.me/Yaron Brook show. I think it's Yaron Brook show. The whole American system is to protect the minority, to protect the individual from democracy, from the majority. And yet, as we become more of a democracy, starting in the, really starting way back with FDR and even before that, the more we become a democracy, and even things like the filibuster disappears, the more who governs is life or death. The more who governs is crucial, because the more everything becomes about political power, the more everything becomes zero-sum. Political power is zero-sum or negative-sum game. Freedom is a positive-sum game. It's a win-win. Democracy is win-lose. Democracy is win-lose, and we are becoming a democracy. Troy, thank you. Troy always steps in around this time from Australia. I don't know what time it is in Australia right now, but it can't. I have no idea. Democracy is what is driving us towards this crisis. I mean majority rule democracy, not voting. Voting is fine, as long as the loser knows that they're not losing that much. As long as the loser knows that the winner cannot eviscerate them, cannot prosecute them, cannot take their stuff, cannot just annihilate their agenda. But with democracy, that's not the case. With democracy, the victor can do whatever he wants to the loser if they control enough levers of power and if they're nasty enough. And that makes every election a higher stakes election. And the fact that we have moved away from individual rights at the Supreme Court level, at the federal, at the executive branch level, and at the legislative branch level, there's no conception of individual rights. The fact that we're making it easier and easier and easier to prosecute minorities, we're making it easier and easier and easier. Is what makes this tribalism, what makes this hatred so visceral between the left and right. I guess I'm still answering that question about hatred of the left and right. All right, I'm just going to look at, let's see if there's anything. What do you think is the proper thing to do with RBG's vacancy before the election? I don't know that there is a proper thing to do. I think because of the nature of our politics, that what we have turned our politics into. And again, I blame Trump to a large extent for this, although Obama set this going. There is no good solution for this. I mean, I'd say in a normal presidency, if Republicans had the Senate and the president was there and they could get this approved before Election Day, then go ahead and do it. I mean, that's fine. I don't think it's appropriate to do in a lame duck session. If you've lost the election, you shouldn't do it. Generally, you shouldn't commit the country to anything substantial during a lame duck, that 2 months of lame duckness. And so I think where we are today is there's no way to win this. I mean, I think Republicans, if they don't do it, will be viewed as weak and lame, and they will suffer the consequence, I think, in the ballot box. I think if they do it, they risk that if Democrats win, they pack the courts, or they do away with the filibuster, which are completely within their right constitutionally, and the Republicans will have nothing, they will have no argument against it, given that the Republicans took a step towards eliminating the filibuster. Granted, it started with the Democrats. It always starts with the left, but that doesn't help us, the fact that it starts with the left, if the right makes it worse. So I don't think there is a good outcome. This is what's scary. And this is what, again, John Cochran points out. There's no good outcome to what we're seeing today in American politics. I mean, the only way out of this is for somebody to win in a landslide, but that increasingly seems unlikely. So that there's no way to claim that it was a stolen election or there's enough fraud if it's so overwhelming. That's the only way to avoid complete chaos. Stephen writes, the left and right these days can't comprehend not voting for either party. They get emotional and offended and say something like you have to vote for one of them, and not voting for one person equals supporting the other. Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right, and that's absolutely wrong, right? Not voting is completely appropriate. There is a point where both candidates are so evil that you can't vote for either one of them. Ayn Rand didn't vote in certain elections, and I think it's completely appropriate not to vote in some elections, and I wouldn't vote in this election. Again, I don't know what you're going to do, but I wouldn't vote for either one in this election. Do you think it would be beneficial or feasible for the government to have non-geographic representatives? Instead of voting for a representative, you could select one. Objectivists could have a voice in politics. I don't completely understand that, so it would be all federalized. You could select one. Who would select it? I guess I don't understand the proposal, so whoever made it, maybe you can give me a little more color in what you mean. Monetize, well, we'll get to that in a minute. 4 years ago, you disagreed with some of your colleagues, such as Greg Salameri, who openly said he was voting for Clinton. I think Harry Binswanger voted for Clinton as well, because he saw Trump as a bigger threat to the ideals of this country. Do you agree with him today? Yeah, I agree with that. I think I would have preferred Clinton be president over the last 4 years. As horrible as that is to say, because I despise Clinton, I think there would have been less damage done. I'm choosing none of the above, as Ayn Rand said, Stephen says. I'm with you, Stephen. Let's see. I work in finance, and I'm really worried about things like MMT, debt, and deficit. How worried are you about these, and what near-term or long-term issues do you see from this? I mean, I'm very worried about them. I think long-term, they are killers, and long-term, they will destroy this country. They will destroy, because I don't think we have any politicians who are willing to take them on. There's nobody talking about cutting spending. There's nobody talking about downsizing the government to take into account the fact that we need to repay the debt. So at some point or another, either we have to inflate our way out of the debt, or we have to default on the debt. Both scenarios are pretty horrific and pretty bad for the country. I've already said that my expectation is that we will see very slow economic growth no matter who wins the election. And again, you might see a bump up if Trump wins and not a bump up if Biden wins. But overall, the next decade is going to be a decade of low to no economic growth at all. And you're going to see a lot of problems, a lot of bad allocation of capital, potentially significant inflation, and then maybe recessions, the consequence of inflation, as of the Fed trying to deal with those inflationary pressures. I think there's going to be a lot of real economic struggles as a consequence of MMT, as a consequence of the debt, as a consequence of deficits, as a consequence of the irresponsibility of Donald Trump and the Democrats over the last 4 years. And of course, at least under the last 6 years of Obama with the Republican Congress, government spending as a percent of GDP actually went down quite a bit. But under Trump, whether with the Republican Congress or Democratic Congress, spending has gone out of control. And under COVID, it's just exploded. So we're in trouble. And exactly how it plays out is hard to tell. But certainly inflation needs to be watched if there's a short-term economic recovery. Otherwise, generally, I expect to see stagnation and a very, very bad environment for wealth creation in the years to come. Don't you think a fourth party would help to stop the destruction? Don't you think a third party got more than 5% and gained traction could be molded into something better? Yes, I do, depending on who launched the third party. I was advocating years ago for the better senators and the better congressmen to leave the Republican Democratic Party and to start a third party that represented, I think, where American people generally are, which is in a relatively basis, a kind of conservative fiscal policy and a liberal social policy. And I think that if such a third party came out, if you imagined, I don't know, in those days I imagined Rand Paul and maybe Ted Cruz and maybe, but today it's hard to believe that those people would go anyway. Maybe Johnson from Wisconsin, maybe a few others, and maybe Justin Amash and some moderates, and all got together under the banner of physical conservatives, socially moderate policies, and I think they could be a significant force in American politics. But nobody has the courage. Nobody has the courage. Nobody has the foresight. Nobody has the willingness to actually do it. I can't do it. I'm too much of a nobody. A representative could have constituents all over the country rather than in one district. But how would you vote for it? What would be the principles by which you vote for it? Each citizen would choose one that he prefers. Everybody would have a representative of his choosing. So, but then I don't understand. Then you'd have 350 million representatives. I guess I don't see how it works. If you could figure out how to make it work, yeah, I don't think geography is the be-all, end-all. Although there is power in geography because of federalism. Thoughts on the movie Somewhere in Time? I think the soundtrack is beautiful. I haven't seen Somewhere in Time, so I don't know. I haven't seen the movie. All right, let's go back to some $20 questions. Yaron, you should do another show addressing the Daily Wire's hosts' attacks on Ayn Rand, especially Michael Knowles, who has referred to her work as unreadable. They write her off as being almost as bad as the left. Yeah, I know. I mean, other than Ben Shapiro, who periodically has said some positive things about her, but even then undercuts it. But of course did have a very nice interview with me, interviewing me. Other than Ben Shapiro, they all hate Ayn Rand, and there's a reason for that. And this is the problem I have with the right? Because they know she's the real threat. She's much more of a threat than the left is. Because the right and the left are the same. What are the differences between them? They're all collectivists. They're all altruists. So philosophically, they're the same. And this is why I think there'll be authoritarianism in America. Because I think a good authoritarian, a charismatic authoritarian, will understand how to bring the left and the right together under a shared platform of sacrifice, under a shared platform of collectivism, under a shared platform of, I think, some form of religion. It's insane for me, for you guys, so that people think that the right is so much better, when at its root, at its fundamentals, at the fundamental drivers of their thinking, if you can call it thinking, is collectivism and altruism. Same as the left. And there's the individualism, individual rights, constitutionalism that animated the old right, that even though they were collectivist and they threw a bone to individualism. That's gone. That is gone. So will I do another show addressing? I'll try. I'll look for something substantive. But if all he says is it's unreadable, then he's an idiot. What am I going to say? hey, Michael Knowles, she's not unreadable.
I didn't
think
get
if
that.
anybody's read Ayn
Could you try
Rand
again?
and you and think that she's unreadable, then go with Michael Knowles. I have nothing to say to you. Monetizing hate.
I didn't get that.
One, make
Could
a
you
series
try
of
again?
shows reviewing Tucker Carlson and other highly rated television personalities. Okay? Live
I
stream
found
the
this on the
debates
web.
with commentary. Nothing gets views like a good fight. The problem is I want to comment on everything they say, so how am I gonna do that during the debates? So we need to figure out how to there's Siri again. I need to figure out how to do that. I'd love to live stream the debates with commentary. That's a good solution. Sorry, I turned off Siri, so I turned her off. Read, relax. I've turned her off. So I guess I'm not sure how to do it, but I'll think about it. And if I come up with a good technical way to do it, I will live stream the debates with commentary. Make a series of shows reviewing Tucker Carlson. Yeah, I mean, I keep thinking I'm going to do that. Keep changing my mind. But yes, maybe if I just take Tucker on and just do Tucker. But you see, I get the most views when I criticize the left, not when I criticize Tucker Carlson, although, arguably he is the left. But yeah, let me think about that. I like the idea of just taking on Tucker. In teaching Johnny to think, Peikoff makes mention of the difficulties of relearning to think as an adult. Does he or anyone else tackle this? What do you think? Can adults be taught to think correctly in an effective way? So I don't think anybody's tackled this. I mean, it's hard enough to tackle this when trying to figure out how children think correctly and how to create a curriculum for children. You know who's tackling this? Is Harry Binswanger's wife, and I'm embarrassed to say her name's just slipped out of my mind. She does courses for adults on how to proper thinking methods. Jean, thank you. How embarrassing. Sorry, Jean. Jean Maroney, I think she goes under Jean Maroney, Binswanger, Jean Maroney. She does courses, and she applies those to helping adults think better. So look up Jean Maroney, Thinking Directions. That's the name of her company, I guess. Thinking Directions by Jean Maroney. And then Gina Gorlin has, I think, certain things to say about this, more on the psychological side. But Jean Maroney does stuff on the psychoepistemological, on the how to think, on how to apply side that's interesting. And so look her up. Thinking Directions. Michael writes, enjoyed your show last week on risk. Lots of application to my work in engineers. Great content, thank you. Appreciate it. Those are my favorite shows to do. Kind of the risk show, the economic growth show. Those are some of my favorites. It's pretty ominous that the Nazis used the term Lügenpresse, lying press, and the term fake news is so widespread in the West today. There are too many parallels. Yes, we read Ominous Parallels by Leonard Peikoff. Too many parallels. He wrote that in the early 80s. Much worse today. Much, much worse today. It's truly, yeah, as the theme of the show today has been, these are scary times. All right. More Super Chat questions? What's up, guys? No? Run out of questions? Do you think Bill Gates would make a good president of the United States, perhaps running as an independent? I mean, yes, I think so. I think there are a number of CEOs who would make good presidents. Not great presidents, because I don't think Bill Gates has the right philosophy, but Bill Gates has the right attitude, the right inclinations, and yeah, I think he would make a good president. He's thoughtful. I think that's what makes him good. He's thoughtful. What he lacks are the right principles. But I think the thoughtfulness would help a lot. I think a lot of CEOs who have managed their companies long term, who've managed large companies, who've made money, would make good presidents. Not all CEOs. Not all businessmen. Okay, there's a show suggestion. Scroll through social media and dismantle the political memes, quotations, posts, etc. that are getting increasingly ludicrous by the day. A lot of people sadly live and breathe those things. Okay, I mean, I'll try that. I find it very difficult to get motivated by constantly addressing other people's stupidity. What do you think of HBO's True Detective, the first season with, how do I pronounce his name? McConaughey, something like that. Anyway, I thought it was really well made, really suspenseful, really dark, really depressing. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was a great show, but recognize that it's really depressing and really dark, and has a very dark view of human nature and man, and even the good guys are miserable. Right. I think it's better than season 2. I like season 3 of True Detective because season 3, I don't want to give it away, but season 3 has a twist at the end that is pretty good. And yeah, I really like season 3. And the acting, wow. This one actor who plays himself young and old, brilliant, really, really good stuff. Right? Yeah, there were 3 True Detectives. I thought the second season it said in Hollywood was the weakest. I thought the first was dark and brilliant. I thought the third was less dark, maybe a little less brilliant, but still really good. So I enjoyed them. Oh, the new season of Fargo should be coming out. Maybe it's out. Talk about dark, bloody, cynical. Fargo is it, but I still enjoy watching them. All right, what's your favorite scene from The Fountainhead? Oh, my God. Usually I get asked about Atlas and have an answer for that. But The Fountainhead, my favorite scene. My favorite scene. I don't know. I have to think about that one. I could tell you right away in Atlas, but you didn't ask about Atlas. If the populist left and the populist right took over their respective parties, is that when a third party could possibly emerge? The Overton window has shifted so far to the left, a correction seems to. Yeah, I've been hoping that that's going to happen. I was hoping that would happen under Trump. But what happened under Trump, which I thought was scary and horrific, is that the more free market, the more individual rights, constitution-leaning Republicans all completely capitulated to Trump, completely became populists. And that was shocking. So the Republican Party, just like that, abandoned all semblance of any kind of sense of individualism, markets, and the things that they had at least claimed to support. And the speed at which the traditional right, let's call them, completely folded to the Trumpkins just was stunning and scary and very, very scary. You were talking about classical music yesterday. Have you heard or read about the woke left's attempt to cancel the Greek classics? No, but I'm not surprised at all. I talked yesterday about the woke left's attempt to cancel Beethoven. They've wanted to cancel. I talked about the English department at the University of Chicago, in a sense, wanting to cancel white authors of great literature. Probably goes back to Shakespeare and Hugo and Dostoevsky. I don't know, but that's kind of the sense. So I'm not surprised at all that they want to cancel Greek classics. I haven't seen it, but yeah, I mean, very, very, very believable. Frank asks, if Trump loses, would he maybe and resign and let Pence take over until January 20th? Also, could you possibly get interviewed on Christine Amanpour? If Pence, I don't know that if Trump loses, he would resign. I have no idea. I don't think so. I think he'd stayed and create as much havoc as he could. I don't see him leaving early. Maybe. I wouldn't put it beyond him, I guess, but I don't think so. Could I get possibly, I get interviewed by anybody who wants me to. I don't, almost, right? Today I got a question, would I be interested in being interviewed on Al Jazeera? And I said no. Christiane Amanpour, I don't know where her show is on. What's it on? PBS? Certainly on PBS, NPR, and CNN, CNBC, Fox. I'd be interviewed on any mainstream media channel, left and right. And if you can arrange it, I will go. Bap tweeted approvingly about Hitler today, and it was a joke. I didn't get it. Is it a one-off attempt to shock or more ominous? Well, Bap, why would it shock you? Bap is not that far removed from Hitler, and I think admires certain aspects about Hitler. Certainly his authoritarianism, his ability to rally for the cause, his militarism, his German appeal to German mythology and the myth of the Übermensch, what is BAP? Bronze Age pervert. So Bronze Age is very much a Hitlerian kind of appeal to the physical, to physical strength, to an era where men were men and killed and slaughtered and fought. And so, there's a lot that Hitler appeals to BAP. And the fact that he would think that would shock, or the fact that he thought it would funny. It's ominous. This is where elements of the right are heading. This is where they've been heading since the coming of the alt-right. You should have seen the tweets I got from the alt-right in 2016. It was the worst anti-Semitic straight out of Hitler's book. So, no, this was always in the cards. This is the evolution of this form of right into some form of fascism, including anti-Semitism. Why not Nazism? Thoughts on the last season of Peaky Blinders? I thought it was the weakest season. I think Peaky Blinders is doing something important. That is, it's following the logic of what it means to be a gangster, even if you're a relatively good gangster. And what it means is madness. And Peaky Blinders is descending into madness. And I thought the ending of this last season was shocking in both the defeat and madness that it brought out. And now the question is, in the next season, what do they do with that? Where do they take that? So I don't know that I thought it was the weakest. It certainly was the least enjoyable because it focused on failure and it focused on madness. But I think it's inevitable. That's how the show has to go. All right. We're almost at an hour and a half. Somebody asks, do you believe in the concept of emotional quotient? I don't know exactly what that means. To the extent that some people are better at reading other people's emotions, at the extent that some people are better at reading their own emotions and controlling them, then I think there's something there. I'm sure that what people actually, the way people use it and the way people refer to it is flawed, but there's something there, I'm sure. Gene says, yesterday's Beethoven show was so good, I watched it twice. Once solo, once with my wife after she came home from work. We loved the history lesson. Yeah, I think it's great. The funny thing about yesterday's show is it's one of the least watched shows I've done in months. And I thought it was really good. And I thought by having canceled Beethoven in the title, a lot of people would watch it. But it really depresses me that when I get into classical music, even though it's in the context of attacking the left, and we do these history lessons, and we talk about substantive issues, and we talk about music and things that actually can impact your life now, today. Right? People are uninterested. When those are the shows they should be most interested because they impact their lives today. Politics, you can't do much about. I've told you this many, many times. There's not much you can do about it. Emmanuel writes, I hate the attitude of resignation in the objectivist community. My family fought communists in Ethiopia to bring us to America. I will not give up this country to either party. I agree. But the worst defeatism is to attach objectivism to one of the parties. One of my goals is to make sure that objectivism is not associated with either one of the parties. And one of the reasons I attack Trump so much, spend so much time on it, passion on it, focus on it, is so that nobody can claim that Trump is related in any way to Ayn Rand and objectivism. Because we have to keep objectivism be objectivism so we can fight for the real vision that we have. And if we affiliate objectivism with one of the political parties, we will water it down and destroy it. And then what do we have? Shelley Sama asks, if you could have dinner with any historical figure, dead or alive, who would it be? I mean, that's easy. It would be Ayn Rand. And beyond Ayn Rand, it would be, I don't know, somebody like Hugo or the Founding Fathers, any one of them, or Aristotle, Newton. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I seem to recall a movie called Beloved with Gary Oldman as Beethoven. Have you seen it? Thoughts? Yeah, Immortal Beloved. Gary Oldman does a phenomenal job. He's a phenomenal actor. He does. The things about the movie I don't like. But overall, I thought it some really powerful performances of Beethoven's music that really got you to swept along. I didn't mention Hugo, but it wasn't in order of preference. It was just a list of people. I mean, imagine going back and having a meal with Plato and Aristotle. So, Immortal Beloved. So, I definitely think it's worth watching. I actually should watch it again. I haven't watched it in a long time. Have you ever visited Monticello? Yes, at least twice. I think I've been to Monticello. Yeah, it's magnificent. What a Renaissance man. What a learned man. All the founders were, but Jefferson, you can see it in his library. The extent to which they read and they learned and they studied and they were interested and they had broad interests. I admire that about them so much. So few people today are more than either really, really narrow specialists or know almost nothing. But to find somebody who knows a significant about a lot of different topics is rare and admirable and interesting. Plus, be a specialist at something, which is always good. All right. By the way, this Thursday, let me just pull up a calendar so I give you the exact information. This Thursday on the Ayn Rand Institute YouTube channel, there will be a webinar. I will be participating in the webinar, and the topic will be the U.S. elections, and it will be ARI and elections and today's political scene. So we'll deal with ARI, the Ayn Rand Institute's view of elections, attitude towards elections, what it can and cannot say about elections, and how we view elections today and in the past. And we'll talk a lot about how Ayn Rand viewed elections. So there'll be a lot of quoting from Ayn Rand and Ayn Rand's attitude towards election. So I think it's going to be with me, Ankar Gate, and Robert Mayhew. So I encourage you to watch that on Thursday at, I think it's 7 p.m. Eastern Time. All right. We've got some big Super Chat questions. They came in at the end. Some big monies. Thank you. Alexander. Michael first says, thank you for the Toscanini tip. There'll be more Toscanini, believe me. Christopher says, thank you. Alexander asks, I once suggested that very few people actually make sacrifices in life, and that these are instead trades they make. For example, feeding the homeless is considered a sacrifice, but you're really trading your time for a good feeling. Is my understanding flawed? I mean, it's a big topic you're asking at the end of the show. Yes, I think at the end of the day, the understanding is flawed. So I think it's true that it's true that a lot of times when people use the word sacrifice, it doesn't apply. So I sacrifice by not going to the movie to stay with my kids. That's not a sacrifice. Your kids are higher value than the movie. But in terms of feeding the homeless, so many people, so the good feeling, which for most people results because they hold an altruistic morality, is not good for them, is actually bad for them. Because it is just a confirmation of a general moral code that the more they follow, the more it hurts them. So doing anything just for a good feeling is not selfish. It can definitely be a sacrifice if at the heart of the core of the good feeling is an anti-life conclusion. In this case, that I have a duty to feel the homeless and I feel good because I'm fulfilling the duty. Now, if you're going to feed the homeless out of a true sense of benevolence, and it's really what you do, and you rationally can see that this is consistent with your values, then the good feeling you get from it is justified, and therefore it's not a sacrifice. But to the extent you're doing it out of a sense of trying to get rid of guilt that you don't deserve, that you haven't earned, or the feeling is based on a fundamental premise that is wrong, then it is a sacrifice. You could be doing something much better with that time, pursuing a greater value in that time, and what you're giving up is the time to pursue that other value. But it's not a higher value because you've got your whole hierarchy of values built around altruism, which distorts everything. Now, that could be a whole topic for a show, so thank you, Alexander, for bringing that up. I'll try to talk about that again in the future. Is objectivism going to be the antidote to today's nihilism of left and right? I certainly hope so. And certainly that is my intention. And I think as it's the only systematic philosophy that can present that kind of alternative. There's nothing else out there. Thanks, Yaron. I look forward to the show and listening to your insight. Appreciate it, Emmanuel. Chalet asked, ever consider inviting Tara Smith on the show? She's been on the show. You can actually search my shows for Tara Smith. I'll have her on again for sure. I mean, I love Tara, and love to have her on, and I will have her on for sure sometime soon. All right, and if you have suggestions on people you'd like to see on the show, please send them to me. And questions and anything else you can send to Yaron at yaronbrookshow.com. And in terms of, don't forget to like the show before you leave. We should be like at 150 likes. Don't forget to share, particularly the shorter videos. But if you like the Beethoven, when we put out the shorter segment of the Beethoven, please share that. And don't forget, if you find value in this, to support the show. Thank you again for all the super chatters that supported it very generously today. I think we brought in a really healthy sum of some. This is getting to the point where it's almost going to be worthwhile for me to do a show every day. Leonard won't come on the show, so don't even ask. I wish he came on the show. I would love to have Leonard Peikoff on the show, but he is retired, and he won't do it. Burton Folsom, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll contact Burton. I've talked to him in the past, and he's very friendly, so that would be a good idea. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your week. I will see you on Wednesday at the same time. Either at 8 or 9 p.m. East Coast time, and then I'll see you on Thursday on the Ayn Rand channel, where we'll be talking about the elections. All right, bye everybody.